this is Johnny B. Bad. I'm the bad man of World Championship Wrestling, and you are listening to WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. And let me tell you, the Scum is no bum. I'm going to kick his booty with my tutti frutti. It's going to be a blessing to teach you a lesson. Listen to the show, or I'm going to get you.
Hey there, all you savages. Welcome back to Wrestling's Glory Days Weekly podcast, WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. As you saw in the title to our show this week, we have yet another great guest from the Glory Days of professional wrestling, and clearly one of the most flamboyant characters of all time. He went by Johnny B. Bad. He went by the Wild Man. And now the champion of choice in his anti-bullying campaign, Marc Mero, joins us this week, Scum.
Yeah, wait a second. Steve, did Marc Mero just call me a bum? Did I hear that intro right?
I think he said you were not a bum, but who knows what he was really thinking. Well,
either way, I prefer the term slob, but I guess bum works whether he was saying I am or am not. Either one, I guess I resemble those remarks. And just for the record, I'm not really interested in anyone referring to my booty as heavy duty or tutti frutti or whatever the hell was going on there. But either way, really happy to have Marc Mero with us here today, Steve. Multiple-time WCW World Television Champion, former Intercontinental Champion, had a great run with both companies, World Championship Wrestling and the World Wrestling Federation, introduced the world to Sable. The hits keep coming here on WGD Weekly, and Marc Mero, we're real happy to have him today.
Absolutely, Scum. And you know we're cruising on here. It's getting to be that fall season. It's Halloween week already, Scum. We've been doing this now. I just wanted to make a quick mention here. This is our 20th episode. It's Halloween week, like I mentioned. It's that time of the year where you need to think about that type of costume. You want to go out with the kids, go do some trick-or-treating, as I would like to call it, trick or eye gouge. But, Scum, who are you going to go as this year?
Well, I think that goes without saying, Steve. I pretty much go as the same gentleman every year. I don't think people would accept anything less than the alter ego of one of our Glory Days Hall of Famers, if you know who I'm talking about.
I think I know who you're talking about, baby. Anyway, it'll be a surprise as to who Steven the Scum dressed up as this year for Halloween. It's going to be great either way. Listen, we got a few pieces of news we wanted to talk about real quickly before we dive into our topic this week, Scum. We got another special episode coming out this Wednesday. It's October 30th. Why don't you tell our listeners all about it?
Yeah, well, this Wednesday we have a very special follow-up for all of our listeners, and if the last interview with this gentleman is any indication for the entire wrestling internet community and, for that matter, the mixed martial arts community, because we're going to have an exclusive coming up this Wednesday, October 30th, a follow-up with the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. And we're going to be hitting on all the topics that he's recently been talking about on Twitter, that he spoke with Steven the Scum about in the last interview. We're going to hit on what exactly he meant when he said he felt he was blackballed from wrestling. We're going to hit on his thoughts and his ongoing crusade to get the fans behind him for a return to the WWE, to TNA. Maybe we'll ask him about some of those opponents we talked about and tossed around. We'll hit on, for the first time, the world of mixed martial arts on the show. We'll be hitting on Dana White's recent outlandish comments toward Ken and toward Tito Ortiz and his brother Frank. Some of the stuff that's been going on recently, the special with the Ken was reunited with his brother Frank. Just so much stuff going on, and that's going to be an exclusive, WGD Weekly, this Wednesday, October 30th. You do not want to miss it. It's going to be up. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be another step in WGD Weekly, bringing you the hard-hitting news and going worldwide, brother.
Absolutely, Scum. We got a couple of things to go over here now that you mentioned Ken Shamrock. I wanted to throw a thank you out there on behalf of both myself and the Scum. WrestlingInc.com has done a really great job recently posting a couple of our interviews. It's gotten a lot of feedback. We've gotten a lot of views on YouTube from it, a lot of downloads on iTunes like you see on our graphic here on YouTube. You can search WGD Weekly all over the internet on iTunes, on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course on YouTube. Follow our show. Hit the subscribe button. We're going to come out with a Of course, every Sunday we have new content, and just like the Scum mentioned, every now and then we got a special episode coming. We've had special episodes in the past with Dan Murphy, the editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. We did a PWI 500 special. We're all over the place. And once again, folks, if you haven't listened to us before, let me go over real quickly what we're all about. We're Wrestling's Glory Days, so that's kind of self-explanatory. We talk about everything classic wrestling, all the great content you remember from the glory days of professional wrestling. We don't ever give anything away about that current product. We don't give you any spoilers or anything like that. So fear not, you won't hear anything that you haven't been able to read about on the internet somewhere else. Of course, we try to give you the best and original content. All of our guests are going to be the ones that you remember from the glory days of professional wrestling, Scum. But like I said, Wrestling Inc. has done one hell of a job here recently, Scum. They posted the interview to Ken Shamrock. It got a ton of feedback. And even more so was Larry Zbyszko's comments about Sting lit up the internet for about 2 straight days a few weeks back. So we wanted to say thank you, a sincere thank you to WrestlingInc.com and all of the other wrestling outlets that picked up our articles and our show, and we're able to post them for us on our, and it's just been tremendous to see, like, you know, the work that you and I have put in to getting these guests on and to doing this show. It's starting to come to fruition. Scum Nation is growing. We got over 10,000 views on YouTube, which is a pretty big number in my estimation. We have, we're pushing 1,000 followers on Facebook. We're pushing 400 followers on Twitter. Every week, the momentum is there. Very excited to have all of you guys listening to our shows right now. Guys and gals, thank you so much for tuning in to WGD Weekly with Steven the Scum. This week, once again, will not disappoint. We got a lot going on. We got Johnny B. Bad, the wild man, Marc Mero. He's going to join us just in a few minutes here. Want to go over a couple other things, Scum, and that is on November 30th. We said it before. We're going to say it again right now. Benton Convention Center, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Come down to WrestleCade. It's going to be a great card. They just added a new match, didn't they?
They certainly did. They added a tag team turmoil match there that I believe it's 8 teams and 8 10-minute time limit matches in somewhat of a gauntlet format, and the teams read the who's who of the history of tag team wrestling. You got the Rock and Roll Express. You got the Powers of Pain, the Warlord, and the Barbarian. Demolition, Axe, and Smash are in the match. The Headbangers are in the match. Rick Steiner is teaming with our friend, Marcus Buff Bagwell. They're in the match. A couple other names that are on there as well. I know one of the teams is the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, with Mr. Number 1, George South, who was actually named the commissioner of WrestleCade for that live event, which should be an interesting twist. So, yeah, great match on there on top of, like we've been telling you, the main event there at WrestleCade on November 30th will be Carlito and Matt Hardy in what I believe is billed as a tables, ladders, and chairs match for the first ever WrestleCade championship. And also, our guest, WGD Weekly's guest, Just Incredible, the Extreme Icon, will be the special guest referee, and the long-awaited return from the ECW days, the rematch, I Quit match between Tommy Dreamer and C.W. Anderson. Little twist of that, reunion of the Extreme Horsemen, which Justin was a member of, with C.W. Steve Carino will be in the corner of C.W. Anderson, as will the longtime manager of the original Four Horsemen, James J. Dillon. So that WrestleCade card is really shaping up to be something special. That's November 30th, the Benton Convention Center down in Winston-Salem. There are still some tickets available. They're really inexpensive. Check it out, www.wrestlecade.com. You don't want to miss it. If you're in the Southeast, if you're on the East Coast, and you can shake free that weekend after Thanksgiving, it's the biggest show going on. There's Fan Fest with over 70 wrestlers, 70 classic performers that will be there, on top of that great card that follows it. Plus, even the Scum will be there. Come say hello to us. I mean, we can't wait to meet the fans there down in Winston-Salem.
Oh, absolutely, Scum. You said it best. I'm looking forward to, like I said this right from day one, I'm making a beeline for Bill Eadie. I'm going to get my picture taken with him, man. We got a couple of guests lined up, Scum, that we've already interviewed that are going to be there. You mentioned Just Incredible, Buff Bagwell, a couple other people, maybe some irons in the fire. You never know there. So stay tuned to WGD Weekly with Steven the Scum. We always have some great guests. Next week is no different. We're not going to give it away, but we do have some great guests lined up for the next coming weeks before WrestleCade, leading up to WrestleCade. I know that I'm very excited to attend that festivities and just to kind of take it all in and be a fan. Like we've always said on this show, Scum, we're fans. We just love classic pro wrestling. We wanted to get what we can out there to share with everybody. And then, we just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. Now, Scum, moving on here, it is Halloween week like we mentioned. And what more flamboyant of a character than you can get with Johnny B. Bad's character, Marc Mero's rendition of Little Richard, that in his WCW days. So, Scum, I wanted to ask you this question: who from the glory days of professional wrestling that you can remember personally had that over-the-top flamboyant character going on? But before you answer, Scum, I wanted to let everybody know I put up a post this week on Wrestling's Glory Days Facebook page for all of Scum Nation to answer who they thought were some of the most flamboyant characters from the glory days of pro wrestling. We'll go over some of the great answers we got there in just a few moments, but Scum, I'm going to give the floor to you. Let everybody know who you think were some of the most flamboyant characters from the glory days of wrestling.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you tagging me in there before I jump into this and get on with the flamboyant wrestlers throughout history. I just wanted to say real quick that it is always a pleasure to be back here on WGD Weekly with you, my longtime tag team partner. It's always a pleasure to be working with the followers and the boys that are providing the info over at Wrestling's Glory Days on Facebook. Always a class act, always top-notch stuff, the best old-school wrestling that you can get anywhere on the Internet. And I also wanted to throw in there, Steve, as to what you were saying about Wrestling Inc., a couple of more names I wanted to drop that, let's say, it's been nice to have them tag us in as well and get us some exposure, is the people over at the Wrestling Observer and Figure 4 Weekly Online and Online World of Wrestling. Them along with Wrestling Inc. have just been fantastic in getting our stuff out there. Just wanted to throw that thank you on top of the one that you had added earlier on. To get onto your question now, without missing a beat here, who do I remember as the most over-the-top flamboyant characters? Well, first off, I would say that one that would go without saying, maybe the most influential heading into the era that we watched, the first guy that would come to mind, flamboyancy, would be the superstar, Billy Graham. The tie-dye, the great smooth talking. I look up, when we were discussing that we were going to talk flamboyant wrestlers, having Marc Mero and the Johnny B. Bad character, I looked up flamboyant, and it's defined as strikingly bold or brilliant, conspicuously dashing or colorful, or elaborately styled in color, dress, or speech. And when I saw that, superstar jumped out at me. If you think of some of the great promos that he used to cut, I'm the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour, and just some of them that I looked over. One that I saw that was funny is, I'm the woman's pet, a man's regret. What you see is what you get, and what you don't see is better yet. I mean, to me, that stuff is just priceless. And here's one, interestingly enough, that shows that great flamboyant minds speak alike that I found on the superstar. And I don't know where or when he said this, but I'm telling you that I've seen it with my own eyes. Superstar at one point claimed, I am the sensation of the nation, the number one creation. Sounds like that could use a baby on the end of it to me, but...
Oh, man, go figure. That's hilarious stuff. Well, Scum, you're talking about superstar Billy Graham, and another guy from that era of professional wrestling that had a very similar persona is a guy that we had on not too long ago, and that guy is Precious Paul Ellering, who also could cut one hell of a promo. We're going to play a little clip of his promo for you right now, so stay tuned here just one second. I wanted to get that on while we're talking about it. Some great stuff from Precious Paul Ellering.
'Tis the Precious Paul, the living doll, the master of disaster, the master blaster, from 8 to 80. The precious one drives all the ladies crazy.
Oh, how cool was that, boy? We haven't heard that in quite a while. I know Paul Ellering is one of our guests here. Right when we first started going worldwide, as the Scum would say with our podcast. I think he was maybe on episode 4, episode 5, real early on. It was a great pleasure having Paul Ellering out, so I wanted to get that soundbite on there for you because Superstar Billy Graham certainly was one hell of a guy that could cut a promo. Now, when you look at that flamboyant, like you said, the definition being colorful, no more colorful guy that comes from the glory days of professional wrestling, and certainly a guy that inspired many gimmicks to come thereafter was the exotic one, Adrian Street, Scum.
Absolutely, without question. And we spoke briefly with Jim Cornette when he was on the show a few weeks back about him representing exotic Adrian Street, and I think we all agreed that he was one of the most underrated performers of that era. Yeah, I mean, take a look at what they did with Adrian Adonis leading into WrestleMania 3 when they gave him the Flower Shop and the Roddy Piper feud. I mean, adorable Adrian Adonis was granted, he was in a much bigger package, let's say, which is, I think, a fair comparison considering they used to have those gift bows in his hair. But adorable Adrian Adonis was kind of a takeoff of the Adrian Street gimmick, and put Adonis in there for that era as one of the flamboyant guys. Heck, even Ace Bob Orton jumped ship, and he was wearing a pink cowboy hat for Adonis when he was standing guard on the Flower Shop instead of Piper's Pit. So, yeah, I would agree 100% with exotic Adrian Street. Another one that I had thought of, Steve, that goes without saying, has definitely gone on record as saying he was heavily influenced by the superstar, Billy Graham, is Jesse the Body Ventura. I remember some of the outfits when they would pan in on Superstars or on Saturday Night's Main Event. He was sitting there with McMahon. You never knew what Jesse was going to be wearing, those huge sunglasses and the different things. Not to mention his wrestling career. And smooth talking, always quick with the tongue, always colorful, the tie-dye trunks, the many different things. I think that the future governor of Minnesota there back in his wrestling days would certainly make the list. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, totally. Those tie-dye trunks, again, just like the superstar, great stuff there. And you mentioned Adrian Adonis, and something that, you know, as a longtime wrestling fan, you knew, and again, with Jesse Ventura, part of that East-West connection, great tag team. He was more of that, you know, wore a leather jacket, was the New Yorker, the tough guy, and then all of a sudden he comes out with that gimmick. And the one thing that kind of, you know, you draw back, you look back on things, and you see where maybe some of the guys got their influence. He had dyed his hair, and he had like a little perm going, and nobody can forget now, going way back, long before our time, Scum, probably the most flamboyant character that started all of this. And we would be completely remiss on the Glory Days of Professional Wrestling podcast that we don't talk about Gorgeous George just for a moment, because he certainly was the one that laid precedent to any sort of a flamboyant gimmick thereafter. So we wanted to give our props to Gorgeous George, of course, a bunch of other guys that come to mind now. Flamboyancy doesn't always have to be like that, I don't know what you would want to call it, androgynous type of a deal. But if you think about it, who was more flamboyant back in the glory days of wrestling than when Macho Man Randy Savage appeared in WWF television?
Absolutely. He was another one that I was thinking about. Macho Man Savage, for sure, with the glamorous robes. And hell, his theme music was Pomp and Circumstance. Macho Man. Absolutely. In WWF, and even when he went to WCW, they had the cheap knockoff of somebody playing it on an electric guitar. So, I mean, Macho Man, definitely one of the most flamboyant, especially in those mid-'80s when he first came into the WWF. I mean, you can't argue that. Certainly belongs on that list. Another one that I was going to get at that, in the same vein, people might not think of as flamboyant, but I don't know how you couldn't. Influential, you know, came through, obviously had his influence in the means of maybe a Gorgeous George, or for sure, Buddy Rogers. What about the Nature Boy, Ric Flair?
Maybe one of the most flamboyant of all time. Absolutely, Scum. And for that matter, the definition of flamboyant, you could probably throw Hogan into the mix.
Funny that you would say that, because one of the other, especially the Hollywood Hogan days in the WWF return, when he had the boas and was rocking it red and white or black and white, but one of Superstar Graham's promo quotes that I found extremely interesting, even more interesting in the fact that he thinks along the same wavelength as the Scum. This definitely predated Hulkamania. and I found a promo of the Superstar saying, "What are you going to do when the Superstar comes down on you?"
And you know, it's funny that we talk about this type of stuff where history repeats itself, and there isn't a gimmick that hasn't been taken in, you know, if you want to use that type of a slang term. Of course, everything gets recycled. Now, there's a good discussion on that Facebook post that I had put up about the Flamboyant wrestlers, how Adrian Adonis ripped off Adrian Street. But nobody talks about everybody ripping off Gorgeous George. So there's always a trend. There's always the next guy that makes what you do, and they take it and they make it a little bit better. We have some guests that we're not going to tell you about right now, but they will get into that type of a content matter over the course of the next couple of weeks. Tune into our show, WGD Weekly, to find out exactly what we're talking about here. But we got some great guests upcoming that were very flamboyant in their own personal way. Then we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. So we're not going to give that away. This week we got Marc Mero, the Wild Man, Johnny B. Bad. He's going to be coming up real shortly. But a couple other guys, and of course these are the readers' choices. Scum, and this one here, he has to be of the more modern era. This guy may take the cake as the most flamboyant of the current era, and that's Goldust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Goldust brought it to a whole new level. I mean, I know that he's returned recently to WWF programming, but Goldust, when he first came in 1996, people did not know what to make of that character. When he came in and he had at first, I'm pretty sure that history would speak that Scott Hall, as Razor Ramon, didn't even want to work with him. Pretty sure that's documented. I don't know of the source, and again, none of the actual players have told us that, but I know that I've read in different places, and I'm pretty sure in Goldust's book that he wrote a few years back, specifically that Hall, you know, was uncomfortable working with him, with the Goldust gimmick, you know, said, well, what are my kids going to say when, and again, if this offends anybody, but I'm pretty sure this was a verbiage you used, that Daddy's getting beat up by a queer. You know, Lawler at one point in the interview in the King's Court, standing in the ring on Raw, actually referred to Goldust as in that same verbiage. So people didn't know what to make. People hated it. I mean, it was outrageous. It was new. It was cutting edge. And Dusty Rhodes, the consummate professional, you know, took it, ran with it, and made it huge. And look at here he is now. He's a co-holder of the WWE World Tag Team Championships. So it certainly passed the test of time. I mean, what's that, about 15, 16, maybe 17 years ago that Goldust debuted?
Yeah, absolutely, Scum. You make a very good point there. And it took a little bit of time for him to become beloved. And I don't think there were very many people out there that could take that persona and turn it into what it is today. So hats off to Dusty Rhodes for coming from that family, the Runnels family, the Rhodes families, if you will, and taking a character that's certainly not a slice of, you know, from Dusty Rhodes to Goldust, you know, 180-degree change in someone's persona, but at the same time, Dusty Rhodes cut some of the most flamboyant promos of all time, so there is a little bit of a tie-in there if you go back and kind of think about it, from what Dusty Rhodes would say on the mic to what Goldust did in his whole entire persona, the gold and black paint, and like you said, Scum, still very relevant in today's product. A couple other guys that are very relevant in today's product, too. At least one comes to mind from the Reader's Choice, and that's Jeff Hardy. I know a main player in TNA, a guy that's held the TNA championship, a multi-time tag team champion with his brother Matt in WWE. Some of the best matches from the Attitude Era were those ladder matches with, you know, with the Dudleys and with Edge and Christian. Certainly a guy that could bring it in the ring, but definitely has his own flavor. And here's a guy that is from the glory days of wrestling that, to me, is, when somebody wrote this down, I laughed my ass off, because this guy is about as flamboyant as you're going to get in his own personal way, and that's the Missing Link. That guy was fucking great. He would grab his hair and run around and use his own head as a weapon, painted green. Awesome character. WCCW down in Texas with the Von Erichs. Did some time in WWF programming as well. He was all over. Dewey Robertson, the Missing Link. A great character. And another guy from back in the day that was also one of our Reader's Choices, and that's George the Animal Steele. Now, you don't get much more flamboyant than that in his own personal way, Scum.
No, I suppose not. Getting back to what you were saying with the Rhodes family, heck, the Dream was pretty flamboyant himself. Some of those interviews that he used to have, and the way he was moving around, and one of the greatest of all time, but you can't deny that he would be on that list of flamboyant performers. What about the Hollywood fashion plate? Classy Freddie Blassie, one of my all-time favorites.
You know what's great about guys like Adrian Street? You mentioned Freddie Blassie. Guys like that, they come to the ring and they have a certain persona, and you're thinking, what the hell's going on with this guy? And then he proceeds to take his thumb and put someone's eye out, bloodying them, raises his hand, gets disqualified, doesn't care, whacks someone with a cane and bites someone's face off and leaves. That legitimizes the flamboyancy when you get into the ring and you're just a legit tough guy. Classy Freddie Blassie was never a guy you wanted to trifle with.
Absolutely not. Prior to his managing days, Classy Freddie Blassie was a complete savage.
Totally. You know, another guy who was a complete savage was Kevin Sullivan. Very flamboyant, but another guy would just pull a metal spike out and fillet your arm if he didn't like you.
We could go on for days here, I think, Steve, with the flamboyant people. But speaking of filleting arms and metal spikes, I know he had certain other personas, but the dude was pretty flamboyant when you saw the Titantron and that white boot tapping its toe and that disco music hit. And out came Mick Foley shuffling down with that arm roll and the strut. And Dude Love was about as flamboyant as they come in the Attitude Era.
Oh, yeah, and you know, that's just another reason why Mick Foley's one of the most talented wrestlers of all time. And I know a lot of people have him as an underrated character, as a guy that maybe, I'm sorry, not underrated, but overrated. But in my book, and I know in your book, Scum, he was one of the best from that era. And one of the most underrated guys when it came to just getting in the ring and putting on a good match. Everybody was like, oh, he sacrifices his body and he's a stunt man. But watch his matches. Go back and watch Cactus Jack before he ever became Mankind and went into a WWE ring. That guy could bring it. That feud with Vader he had in WCW was some great stuff in a time when the programming sucked. You know, Cactus Jack and Vader really, took it to a new level as far as a good rivalry goes when there wasn't really a lot to be watching. And I think Buff Bagwell on our show mentioned it was a time of gimmicks. And certainly when if you go back and watch a match between Vader and Mick Foley from that era, there wasn't any gimmicks going on. There's two grown men beating the daylights out of each other. So very underrated in my opinion, overrated to some, not to us. Mick Foley, another guy that really didn't do much in-ring work, but we can't talk about flamboyancy without talking about I love you, and that's Brother Love.
Yeah, Brother Love was certainly pretty flamboyant. No doubt about it. Another guy that people just love to hate. I mean, the wrestling fans as a whole, as a group, are just, that a character like that will always work. If you can have a flamboyant character that is cheered, but for the most part, that usually to make that type character work, they're going to come in and people are going to hate their guts. And like you said, one of my long-standing analogies from back in the day that you've heard a million times is people will show up to hate something. People will put money on the table to show up and scream their lungs out, throw things at people, and hate them. And that flamboyant character in wrestling, given the fan base, given that they've come to see two people get it on and beat the shit out of each other, when you have somebody coming out there with the face makeup on and the pink boas or the gold face paint or the wigs or any of these things we've been talking about, even some back in the day, some of the more gaudy robes and the things like that, immediately the people want to hate them.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Scum. Absolutely. And Brother Love, as a kid, I remember I hated that guy. Did not like him at all, but I stayed there to tuned in, and I stayed on that channel just to tell him through my television how much I hated him. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that joined me in that. Bruce Pritchard, of course, a very good creative mind, has worked for years in WWE, did a little bit of time in TNA as well. So that Brother Love character holds the test of time as a flamboyant character that I'm pretty sure everybody hated. But a guy, Scum, like we were talking about, our guest on the show this week, is a certainly flamboyant character himself, Marc Mero. Johnny B. Bad's character here. He'll go into a little bit of detail as to how that character came about. I'm going to leave that to him. Line with us today. Stay tuned, folks. We're going to take you to our interview now. At Marc, formerly Johnny B. Bad at WCW, a 3-time TV champion and also Intercontinental Champion. Involved with anti-bullying all over the school districts of all over the country. Some fantastic work that he's done. But we're going to go back a little bit, talk about his roots starting in wrestling, and we'll get going from there. Marc, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me on the show today.
Well, we appreciate it. But let's get right down to business here. I know that you got some engagements to work on, so we'll get you going and get you out the door here. You started out upstate New York guy, just like myself in the Scum, Golden Gloves champion in New York State, and you worked with Ray Rinaldi, a very well-known boxing trainer out of Central New York. So you go from the boxing ring and flip over to the squared circle professional wrestling. So give us a sense, actually, how you went from boxing to wrestling and then making your debut on such a big stage at WCW and coming up with that persona that we all know of Johnny B. Bad. Give us a little bit of history as to how you go from being a boxer to Johnny B. Bad.
Well, boxing was my first love. I was actually a football and hockey player, too, in high school, and I started boxing my senior year in high school. And I ended up winning the Golden Gloves, the gold medal in the Empire State Games, the AAU, and then I became invited to train with the USA boxing team. So I moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, and was with the U.S. boxing team for a while. And then I decided to turn professional in boxing. And 2 weeks before my first professional boxing match, I had my nose shattered in an accident. I needed reconstructive surgery, and the doctor said it'd be almost a year before I could come back and start having full contact again. In that time off, I just started making some horrible choices in my life and got involved in drugs and alcohol. And next thing I know, my life just goes by, and all of a sudden I'm 30 years old, and I was sitting in my apartment with some of my friends, and we were just drinking beers, watching TV. And my buddy had the remote control, and he's flipping through the television, and he lands on professional wrestling. And I go, whoa, stop it there. Stop, let me see this. And then out of nowhere, I just go, hey, guys, I can do that. And my friends started laughing so hard. They go, Marc, those guys are so big, they'll pick you up over their head and throw you right out of that ring. Plus, Marc, you're 30 years old. But when you have when you get that aha moment in life and you see something, you go, I can do that. So the next thing I needed to do was take action towards this dream. And I found out where there was a wrestling school. I was living in Venice, Florida. There was one in Tampa. It was Boris Malenko's wrestling school. And I started training there. And then I started going up to the WCW as one of the guys, the enhancement guys that get beat up on television for like $150. And I started doing that, and that's when Dusty Rhodes noticed me, and he said, "Hey, Marc, did anybody ever tell you look like Little Richard, the singer?" And I said, "I never heard that before." And next thing you know, he gave me this gimmick, and oh my gosh, Johnny B. Bad was born, and oh man, it was just my life took off. I mean, it was just incredible, the notoriety that character brought to me. Next, I'm on Black Entertainment Tonight. I'm having dinner with the President of the United States. It was just crazy how everything happened so quickly with that character. And not only that, everybody thought I was black. So Michael Jackson asked me to come on to his concert, So it was just incredible, the takeoff of the character.
That's some fantastic stuff. And again, now starting at such an older age 30, making a decision to enter a career where the success rate isn't that high. It certainly took a lot of guts to do that. Now, as you start your career out, you had a couple of run-ins throughout your career with a guy by the name of Steve Austin, and now you had a good run with him in 1994. He was the United States champion in WCW at the time, and then later on, in the WWF, you worked with, the Stone Cold character. So tell us what it was like a little bit working with him, prior to that big push he got as Stone Cold back in 1994, and then again working with him as that character. Was that something that you would ever see? Could you have imagined how high his star was going to rise?
Oh, Steve was great to work with. I mean, he was stunning Steve Austin with WCW. He was such a his work ethic was incredible. He was just a great ring general. He was unbelievable. I mean, he could have a good match with anybody. He was, and he really helped me a lot. When I say help me, he helped me develop into a better wrestler by working with someone so talented. You really step up your game when you work with a guy like that. And he would, some of the moves that I would do were kind of like high flying, and and a little bit crazy, and he had never had a problem with anything. He was like, let's do this, let's do that, and he was a worker, boy, I tell you. And I had some really good matches with Steve.
Very good. Definitely a lot of memorable matches there between you and Steve. Keep moving along here. Chronologically, with your time in WCW, shortly after you worked with Austin, you got your first taste of a championship gold down there at Fall Brawl '94. You beat Lord Steven Regal to become the television champ. And then around that same time was when Hulk Hogan came down to the company, became the champion, had left WWF, and a lot of the older faces from WWF started to surface in there. One of your first challengers was one of them, the Honky Tonk Man. Bring us through your thoughts about that time, defeating Regal to get your first championship, and how special that moment was for you as far as your wrestling career goes. And then what were your thoughts on working with the Honky Tonk Man? If you can recall, seemed like that was a pretty short program there, and his stay there was kind of short. Do you remember why that was, why he was there so briefly?
Well, first and foremost, going back to winning the title, that was really exciting part of my life. I mean, that was, when you get into the business, even though wrestling's entertainment, winning a title is really exciting. They're putting the strap on you, and Lord Steven Regal was another guy that was great to work with. Man, he was another guy that really, we had some pretty good matches together. I mean, I learned a lot from him also. When the Honky Tonk Man came into the company, it was exciting because he was a really well-known name, and it was kind of really cool wrestling against Honky Tonk Man. I believe it was in Detroit I wrestled him, and it was a short-lived, stay that he had there. I guess, from what I understand, he had some disagreements with the company on direction and so on and so forth. So our match was changed a couple of times on what it was going to be like and what it was supposed to be like and whatever. But whatever. He was a good guy. I liked Wayne. He was a good guy, and it wasn't the kind of matches that I was used to having. It was a much slower paced match and much more, just. I don't know how to put it, but not as physical, I guess you would say.
Okay. Sure. Well, yeah, again, he certainly has a very known, he's certainly a legend in the wrestling business, like you said, maybe not the quicker, more aerial style or whatever, but
that's okay. But that worked for him. I'm not
sure.
Bad mouthing. That worked for him. I mean, gosh, I only wish that I would have been able to do that as good as he did. I would have had 10 surgeries by now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I didn't think you were knocking him. I didn't come across that way at all. I was just expanding on what you were saying there. So anyway, after that. You're in the television title picture for a while, back and forth with some other people. You work with another legend in the wrestling business, Arn Anderson.
He was so much fun to work with. I really liked Arn. Not only, as a great wrestler. Oh my gosh, he was unbelievable. But as a person too, he was he had one of the best sense of humor. I always enjoyed the locker room when Arn was around, and. He also, another guy that I learned a lot from that helped me out in the ring. Remember something, I started wrestling and practicing wrestling in 1990, never been in a ring or anything, and all of a sudden, 1991, I signed my first contract, and I'm thrown there with these legends that have had thousands of matches, and here I am as green as a tree, and I'm trying to hang with these guys, and it just took some people that really wanted to help me, and Arn was definitely one of them that really reached down and helped me with some ideas and things like that, but I always got great memories of Arn.
Absolutely. We've talked to a few people that have worked with Arn and when they were a little bit younger, and that's pretty much been the consensus. Great guy, great sense of humor, great to kind of work with and learn from. What were your thoughts on the boxer versus wrestler match I seem to remember you guys having one year at Uncensored?
I got one really funny memory about that was, well, as you guys know, wrestling's entertainment, And a working punch is when you could really nail a guy, but it doesn't look like you don't even hurt him, but it looks like you took his head off, And I remember the referee coming over to me, and I can't remember the referee. I don't know if it was Jody Hamilton's boy, Nick Anderson. I think it was Nick. I can't remember. But anyways, the referee would come over to me, and he said, Arn said, now this is during the match, he said, Arn said, punch him in the face as hard as you can. I'm thinking, I would never want to punch. Why would I want to do that, And I said to him, ask him why he wants me to punch him in the face as hard as he can. And he comes back, he goes, because he said your working punch is killing him. So Arn had a great sense of humor while you're wrestling him,
Sure.
There's a lot of memorable programs that you had worked with, and that television title and yourself, Mark, was pretty synonymous there for a while. You worked back and forth with a guy that it looks as though you still stay in touch with, and that's DDP, Diamond Dallas Page. And this feud, would see you not only regain the TV title on a couple occasions, but he also at one point had an opportunity to go ahead and steal away Miss Kimberly, who, was tired, part of the storyline. She was being mistreated by Diamond Dallas Page. So take us through that angle where you, work with Diamond Dallas Page in and out of the ring. Give us your opinion on what he is all about with the DDP yoga and everything. Now it looks as though you guys stay in touch. And then talk to us about a match that actually never really took place, and that was a loser leaves WCW match. It was scheduled for 1996 pay-per-view uncensored and never really happened. So give us your overall thoughts of working with the television title with Dallas Page and Kimberly, and then talking about the match that never was there in WCW.
Well, working with Dallas, and it's no secret Dallas and I are still great friends today, but he is by far one of the hardest working people I have met that I have ever met, bar none. I mean, he's just an incredible work ethic, and he always had that. I mean, we'd go down to the power plant and work out together for hours, and then especially when I got in a program with him, I mean, we'd work out at the power plant, working on moves and matches and things like that. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd say, oh my gosh, who is calling me at this hour? And, of course, I pick up my phone. It's Dallas. And he goes, hey, brother, I want to run by a spot. And I'm going, what? Dallas, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. He goes, I know, but I couldn't sleep. I had to tell you the spot I want to do. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? But that was his work ethic. And, and I'll tell you something. If you're ever going to bet on someone, bet on DDP. That guy will just, he's got that never die attitude. He never gives up on anything you do. And I remember guys laughing at him in the locker room. He was 35 years old trying to become a wrestler. And I just got so much admiration for Dallas, not only as a friend, but just as a wrestler, as a human being, as an entrepreneur, all the things he's accomplished in life. He's just phenomenal. And believe me, your DDP yoga is going to be a household word someday. You watch.
It seems to be trending in that direction, and it's really great to see, and again, now myself and the Scum, we've been wrestling fans for 30 years, and we watch a lot of people come and go, and it's unfortunate a lot of the paths that, some of the folks take after their wrestling career. So it's great to see not only yourself, very important, working with the children and the anti-bullying, and along with Dallas Page, making sure people kind of keep their weight down and stay in shape. So it's great to see a couple of guys that we both enjoyed watching in the ring take their careers to a different level, outside the ring. So that's, some tremendous work on both of your parts. So we just wanted to add that in there. Now, again, moving along here at WGD Weekly, we're going to move on and talk about your transition from WCW to the World Wrestling Federation, working with Vince McMahon. And I'll leave it at that. So just take us through the transition of what was happening at the time with you, WCW, and then moving over to working with WWF and capturing the Intercontinental title. You won it in a tournament, and you beat 3 legends along the way to capture that title, and Steve Austin, the late great Owen Hart, and of course Farouk, Ron Simmons, one of the best to ever step in the ring as well. So take us through just the transition from going from one company to another and capturing what at the time was still a very, very prestigious championship in that Intercontinental title.
Well, my contract was up in the WCW, and I believe it was, February or March, my contract was up, and I started having talks with WWF about coming down there, and Vince loved the Johnny B. Bad character, and so part of my deal was when I went to the WWF, he gave me I believe I was one of the first wrestlers ever to get a guaranteed contract. I mean, it was guaranteed whether I got hurt or not, which was unheard of back then, because they give you a downside. It's a downside, smaller portion of the contract when you got hurt because you'll be off for a while. But I would get my full salary if something happened to me. And not only that, I also asked, which was very unusual at the time, or any time, probably even still now, but before they even met my wife at the time, I said I'd like my wife to fly everywhere I flew. Because I didn't want to go through. I got involved in drugs and alcohol and all the garbage in WCW and really started messing up my life again. And I just wanted to be on the straight and narrow. And I knew if I had my wife there with me and my marriage would stay strong and so on, so forth. But so Vince agreed to it. He said, I'll fly your wife wherever you go. And I said, well, then I'll tell you what, I got another idea. Why don't we make my wife a part of the show? She could be my valet. And he wasn't too keen on that at first because he'd never seen her. He didn't even know what she looked like. And so then it was time for me to sign my contract with WWF, and he flew me up to New York, and I said, well, if you're flying me, you need to fly my wife. Remember, the deal is she goes everywhere I go. And he was like, well, I've never heard of this before, but okay. So he flew my wife up to New York with me, and then when he saw her, he said, we're putting her on TV. And that's how Sable began. And, I signed a 3-year contract with the WWF, a guaranteed contract, and they put the Intercontinental strap on me not too long after I got there, and yeah, it was awesome. I mean, Owen Hart was another guy that was wonderful to work with, and of course Steve Austin. I can't say enough about that guy. He was just a workhorse, and even Farouk, man, did a great job in our championship match that we had. But it was beating three amazing, talented guys. I think that I think was I don't know if Owen Hart was a world champion, but I know he's won many belts before, But I know Farouk and Stone Cold were both former world champions. But so to beating those guys for the Intercontinental title was awesome. And but then again, then I got injured. Shortly after that, I blew out my knee, and I needed total reconstruction of my knee, and I was out for 8 months. And that time off was when my ex-wife became very popular, with going out there and selling merchandise and becoming the diva and so on. And then they came up with the storyline of me being jealous with her, and I'm thinking, wow, what a great idea. I mean, and I know a lot of wrestlers would say, oh, well, that buried you. You'll never, when a girl beats you up or something, you never consider nothing again and all that. You know what? All that didn't matter. They were backing up the Brinks truck to our house, So you really look at what is truly important. It's an entertainment. It's like being an actor, and I'm getting paid very well for it. Now she's getting paid very well for it. So all in all, you look back on your career and you think, well, I could have changed this or not done this. But you know what? I have no regrets. All the paths I've taken in my life have ended up to where I am today, and I couldn't be happier or feel more of a purpose for living than I do right now.
That is fantastic. It's great to hear that, again, now going down the right path after you hang up the boots, so to speak, and keep it in the public eye and doing some good deeds along the way. thinkpause.org is your website there, so we wanted to get that onto the show real quick, make sure people give that a visit, and certainly follow you on Twitter, all your adventures. I see that you got a lot of very inspirational tweets on there. But I wanted to ask you real quick, and we're going to get back to that hopefully if we have some time, but take us through what it was like when you sat down to sign your contract, and Vince obviously talks about your ex-wife Sable there and shows interest. There must have been a point in time where you had like a creative meeting. And take us through, if you did, what it was like sitting in a creative meeting with the McMahons and going through just getting, your name or Sable's moniker. And what was that like?
Great question. It was very interesting because when they first came to me, I mean, obviously we were hoping to do something similar to Johnny B. Bad because it was such a flamboyant, outrageous character, but we couldn't. I mean, WCW owned the rights to it, and you didn't want to. And this went back when there was a lot of lawsuits going back and forth. So they didn't want to mess with it. So they wanted to come up with something totally different. So the creative came to me and said, well, Mark, what about if we do this kind of like Wild Man Marc Mero? And I really, when they first said it, I was like, it wasn't really sure. I wanted to hear more about it. And they come with some drawings and stuff. And it kind of looked like I was from a jungle, like Tarzan or something, you know? I remember Vince McMahon wanted me to do like a Tarzan yell, which I couldn't really do. I didn't have the voice for that, you know? And so I never really got behind the character. You know, it's like when you have a really cool character or an outrageous character or flamboyant character or whatever it was, that was, you know, was so opposite of who I was. It was actually kind of fun to play something that you're not, you know? But being the Wild Man character, I really didn't even know what it was. I never really got my feet underneath it, you know, or got my arms around it as far as, what am I, from a jungle? What am I, you know? And so that was kind of lost in the transition from me going to the WWF. But again, like I said, you know, I went out there and did the best I could with it. And then obviously when they turned me into marvelous Marc Mero, using the old boxing gimmick from my past and being jealous of Sable's popularity and her notoriety, it all worked for us. You know, it really did. I mean, like I said, there's nothing I would have changed.
Very cool stuff there. We appreciate you being with us here today, Mark, on WGD Weekly. Just a couple more questions we had for you here. We know you're a busy man, so your time is very valuable. We understand that. So moving on, back to when you were Intercontinental Champion, before the injury and stuff, you had an opportunity where you worked a program with another star that eventually rose to great levels, still is involved heavily in the product today, and that's Triple H, at the time Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Once again, just like we were looking with when we had asked you about Steve Austin, given that you worked with him at a time that before, you know, he necessarily rose to those heights, and obviously long before he had, you know, was a part of the company structure there, like he is now, being married to Vince's daughter. What were your thoughts of working with Triple H in the ring, out of the ring? You know, you hear a lot of opinions from people, but again, in some of our guests that have worked with him, we've, you know, heard a lot about the passion he had, and a lot about things that you don't necessarily hear all the time. So I just was wondering, what was your experience working with Triple H?
Well, you know, my experience was really good because Triple H was, you know, he was and is a talented wrestler. He was like a student of the game, you know. So he really, I really enjoyed working with him. We wrestled each other hundreds of times because we had, you know, obviously tour for quite a while on the road, and we wrestled each other every single night, you know. And it obviously came in, not only that, but WCW wrestled many times. So we wrestled each other quite a few times. His first belt he ever won was when he beat me for the Intercontinental title. But, you know, obviously seeing what he's done in his career and going to such amazing heights is just phenomenal. But he was really good to work with, too. Very similar to Stone Cold as far as their work ethic. And you know, they could make guys that weren't as talented, you know. I wasn't as talented as a Triple H or a Stone Cold, you know, and they made our matches look fantastic. So my hat's off to that guy.
Very good. Again, that's an opinion that we've heard, much like we said with Austin, from a lot of people that have worked with him. You know, you can almost see it come through him on the screen, the passion that he has for what he's doing, and you got to have a lot of respect for that.
Right.
So moving along then, and I believe what would be after the injury that you had in 1998, you kind of revisit those old boxing days somewhat. You had a program there with Tough Man competitor Butterbean. Some pretty entertaining stuff, if I remember right. Wanted to touch on that. And, you know, also around that time, they introduced the whole Brawl for All thing on Raw, where the wrestlers actually kind of fought in that Tough Man competition type setting. Look back at us for the whole Butterbean angle, you know, how that came about, you know, what your take on was working with him, and And then how about also, if you wouldn't mind, the concept and how the entire Brawl for All thing played out and where that idea comes from?
Right. Well, working with Bean was actually he was a really, really nice guy. I like Eric Esch is a great guy, and it was really funny because we were doing this brawl, this boxing match, kind of in a wrestling ring, and the finish is supposed to be me hitting him over the head with a chair. And there was two chairs, one underneath the ring, that we would use, and of course we'd sit on a stool in between the rounds. Well, unfortunately, the trainer that was working my corner grabbed the wrong stool, not the one that was supposed to break after I hit him over the head, and he handed me the real oak stool. And here I am at the finish trying to hit him over the head, and unfortunately the stool didn't break the way it was supposed to. And then I hit him again, and then finally, even just the only thing that broke was the seat came off, But I'm hitting him as hard as I can, so it was kind of funny that night. Eric and I went out to dinner with some people, and he said, I know wrestling's entertainment, but man, that really hurts. How do you guys do that? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't have the heart to tell him that we grabbed the wrong stool. But anyways, he was a great guy. And then, getting involved in the Brawl for All, my first match was against Steve Blackman, who was like just, he's an animal. The guy's, kind of studied in MMA and stuff, and he just took me down at will. I had no defense for him as far as a takedown, so I was out of the tournament fairly quickly. And then all of a sudden, he was injured in training or something, and he was supposed to go against John Layfield, so they called me and said, hey, Blackman's hurt. Would you like to, could do the Brawl for All against Layfield? And of course, I was like, absolutely. He wasn't the nicest guy in the world, and he wasn't very nice to me back then, And so I said I would love to, and of course I got right back into it. And you got to remember something. At this point in my life, I'm 38 or 39 years old. I wasn't a young kid no more, and but I gave it everything I got. We fought to a draw, and then we had to go one more round, and they gave the decision to John, and and whether he deserved it or not, it doesn't even matter. He just he's a tough guy, man. He's a real tough guy.
Well, it speaks to your toughness, It's getting in there and fighting to a draw with John Layfield. I mean, he's pretty tough, renowned as a pretty tough guy. So that, again, with that Brawl for All, that was not scripted whatsoever, correct?
No, I wish it would have been.
Right.
I could explain I was taken down 55 times in 1 minute.
Right. Gotcha.
Tougher than a nickel steak, when somebody used to say, I think. But we get moving on here now. Now, Mark, we get into the year, late '98, early '99. And, you worked in a couple of programs, and then you end up having Jacqueline in your corner for a little while. And then all of a sudden, Marc Mero kind of, fades away from WWF television for quite some time. And that was pretty much, the point where Marc Mero kind of walked away from wrestling for quite a while. Now, take us through the back end of your working in WWF, and of course, you make an appearance a few years down the road in TNA, NWA TNA Wrestling, and you're back as the moniker of Johnny B. Bad, and that seems to be maybe the last full stop that Marc Mero has in his wrestling career. So take us through the culmination of working, with Vince McMahon and working up in WWF, your brief stop at TNA, and tell us how you get inspired to work now into the anti-bullying campaign that you're working on.
Yeah, unfortunately the ending of the WWF didn't go well. My ex-wife had some problems with the company, and there was a lawsuit, and I had 3 years left on a guaranteed contract, and I just got a new contract, and and I decided to walk away. It really wasn't fun anymore. It was just a sad part of our lives, and so we left the wrestling arena, and obviously the lawsuit was settled out of court between my ex-wife and then WWF, and I went on to, and I'm no secret, we both got divorced in 2004, and she went on to marry Brock, and I met an incredible woman that I've been married to now for 4 years. So we both went separate lives, but you know something what's amazing is we've never said a bad word about each other. I have nothing bad to say other than, you know, that you think about the good memories that you had together, but I've never been happier in my life now as far as what I do with speaking at schools. I've spoken to over 650 middle school and high schools around the country, even went over to Russia and speak. And it's just snowballed into this amazing anti-bullying, suicide prevention, goal setting, and substance abuse program that we're doing at schools all over the world. And there's no greater joy in my life. I've, like I said, never been happier. I have no anger or animosity of any of the past things that happened to me. You know, they always say, he who angers you controls you, and I don't want to be controlled by anybody. So I have complete forgiveness or animosity to anybody that maybe I didn't like before, and even apologies. If I've ever said or did something to someone that offended them, I'm certainly sorry. I live a life now that is just so different. I'm a Christian, and I'm actually an ordained minister now, so I'm really going out there and I'm really trying to help other people in life and not make some of the same mistakes that I made. And it's just a great joy, and that's why if anybody's listening to this and you have a kid in school, and go to our website, thinkpoz.org, and see about having us come to your school and present our Choices program at your school.
That's fantastic. I would say that who wouldn't want to, you know, what better way to get a message across than through someone, you know, that has been at the heights that you were, that can relate to the different things that you just spoke of. That's thinkpoz.org. Any of our listeners are interested in getting Mark to come out and speak with the kids at their school. He's been all over the country doing that, and getting the message across, and from what I see, to a great response. So, you know, hats off to you for all that you're doing, Mark. We really want to thank you for joining us here today on WGD Weekly. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, reliving some of those classic moments and your time in professional wrestling. Personally, I get a chuckle out of the Butterbean and the whole wrong stool incident. I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, we really appreciate your time and having you here with us, and love to have you back at some time. Always welcome. And again, thanks a bunch, and thanks for all the work you're doing with the kids.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me on your show. You guys are awesome, man. I hope to someday meet you guys in person. Yeah,
that would be fantastic. That'd be great. Look forward to it.
All right, guys. God bless you, man, and take care of yourself.
Well, once again, there you have it, folks. We got the wild man, Marc Mero. He joined us today. It was a great interview, Scum. What you think, man?
Absolutely. Fantastic. Falls right into place with all of our other guests. What a great guy. What a great thing that Marc Mero is doing, traveling around the country to the schools, traveling around the world to the schools, and, you know, getting the message out there a lot like WWE does, but he's doing it on his own, stepping forward, giving back to the kids, to the fans with his anti-bullying campaign. And, you know, can't say enough about the guy. What a great interview, though, Steve. I got to admit, and you know, both of us, big fan, we always used to watch the Attitude Era, and I know maybe underrated, maybe underutilized, some might say, and maybe it was the fact that Sable came into play. And, you know, like he said, they were back in the Brinks truck up to his house. What did he care? But I got to say, I love the Butterbean story. He gets handed the wrong stool, and he just levels Butterbean in the back of his melon with a wooden bar stool. And afterwards, they're out eating, and he's chuckling as Butterbean. I can't recall exactly what Butterbean's actual name is, so Mr. Bean, we'll call him, says that, geez, you know, I thought that this wrestling stuff, it's pretty rough out there. I didn't realize, I thought it was fake. And not fake when you're catching a oak stool to the back of the skull, I suppose.
Absolutely. You know, you also touched on one of our favorite guys, Bradshaw, just being one of those surly cusses from the back, which personally I can envision him as that, so I'm glad he didn't break that persona and certainly lived up to being just one vile, nasty dude. Certainly a guy that I've always been, been very much in love with. Bradshaw, the clothesline from hell. Certainly a guy who's super vicious. But Marc Mero, like you mentioned, Scum, his website, folks, thinkpoz.org. That's thinkpoz.org. Give it a look. Maybe he'll come to your school district near you, show your kids how not to pick on each other and stuff. It's a great message. He's on Twitter, at Marc Mero, at MarcMero. Definitely go give him a follow. Marc Mero was a great guest, certainly a gentleman. Appreciate his time today. He had a very busy schedule, and he was able to take time out of his day to talk to us here at WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We got plenty more irons in the fire, like my man Scum says. A lot of things going on down the road here. Of course, WrestleCade. Don't miss it if you can. November 30th, Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We keep talking about it because it's going to be a huge event, and we want you to be there.
Absolutely. We're going to be there, that's for sure. Front and center. Justin Credible will be there with us, the former ECW champion. Just a lineup, the incredible lineup. Dallas Page, Jake the Snake Roberts, Demolition, Buff Bagwell, Rick Steiner. The names go on and on and on. You come out, you get some autographs, meet the guys. It's a whole day event. Great card of live action following it. You really can't miss it. For all the details, it's www.wrestlecade.com. And Steve, one more thing I wanted to touch on with Mero in the interview. Recently, and I know I was telling you this, I just popped in. I have quite a old VHS, dating myself here by letting those call letters out, but an old VHS collection. And I just randomly will pop in, whenever we're together, we'll grab a couple of tapes and pop them in. You don't really know what's on there. Well, I happened to pop in Over the Edge 1998 in your house pay-per-view, WWF. And it was the one where Mero was against Sable. And I got to be honest with you, I don't know why they didn't continue his angle with what he was doing there. Of all the things on there were great matches on there as well. But that segment, the Mero Sable, where he tricks her and that he's sorry and then rolls her up the small package and then celebrates afterwards like he just won the Olympics or the Super Bowl or something, was one of the funniest. I was sitting on my couch laughing out loud. I don't know why they didn't continue with Marvelous Marc Mero as that complete phony, sarcastic gimmick, because, man, it was hilarious. And I got to be honest with you. If it's getting a laugh out of me, it's good in my book. So, again, any of the listeners out there, if you have access to it, check out Mero vs. Sable from Over the Edge 98. No 60-minute Broadway. It's not going to get 5 stars from anyone, but I'll tell you what, it's entertaining.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Scum, and that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea as to how diverse Marc Mero could be. And, everybody kind of got on him about the Johnny B. Bad character. You can look around the internet, places like, a former stomping ground, WrestleCrap.com. I looked up recently here, they had a little write-up about some of the failed gimmicks from WCW. But the one thing he mentioned, the writer, I'm sorry, I forget who the person that wrote it is, but it was on WrestleCrap.com. You can search through the archives. He talks about how terrible the Johnny B. Bad gimmick is, yet he doesn't forget to mention how great of a performer Marc Mero is, and I certainly think that kind of falls under the radar sometimes when you have a character as polarizing as a Johnny B. Bad or the Wild Man. People love you or they hate you, but you have to have a little bit of flexibility when you look at what they can actually do in the ring. Now, you go from what you were mentioning there with a very entertaining piece against Sable to being able to, in one night or in one tournament, beat Owen Hart, Steve Austin, and Farouk, Ron Simmons, to win the Intercontinental title. So there you go. You got another guy from the glory days of professional wrestling that could be entertaining, but when it comes down to it and the bell rings, the guy can bring it.
Absolutely, Steve. And again, getting back to the Johnny B. Bad gimmick, whether you liked it or whether you didn't, Marc Mero, as Johnny B. Bad, became one of the best performers at WCW at that time. He was constantly in the TV title picture. He was battling for the U.S. title. I mean, he went at it with everybody at that point in time. He had big programs with Austin, with Arn Anderson, with Regal. Just recently, when I made the trip up to the Pro Wrestling Syndicate show and met the fellas from the Midnight Jury, when I I was talking to him about some of our upcoming guests, and Marc Mero came out, and their exact response, no way, we just watched the pay-per-view, and it was Mero versus Regal for the TV title, stole the show. Well, I mean, there you go. I mean, his matches, regardless of the confetti gun or whatever they called it that he had there, and the Little Richard look, by the end, they had kind of went by the wayside with some of the hairspray and stuff, and he wasn't that over the top, even though he was still Johnny B. Bad, and it was because he was a damn good in-ring worker.
You got to have guys like a Marc Mero on your card to keep the fans entertained. Like you said, the Steven Regal, Marc Mero match steals the show. Who else was on that card? I bet you Luger was on the card. I bet you Sting was on the card. You see what I'm saying? So not everybody can be the top of the card guy, and you get your hand, you play your hand, and you do the best you can. So guys like a Marc Mero that can really fill out your card and make an entertaining show are the people that you know oftentimes get overlooked or they get criticized because of their character. But when the bell rings, man, they bring it every single time. Both those guys, perfect example, Steven Regal and Marc Mero, stealing the show on a pay-per-view. That's some fantastic stuff, and certainly, you know, as you look back, not everybody can be the good guy. There has to be a good bad guy to be a good, you know, to have a good guy. So to have that, you know, diversity on your card is pretty incredible, and no matter where he went, he certainly lit it up. He got the fans involved, and whether you loved him or whether you hated him, at least you had an opinion on a guy. The worst thing you could ever have when a guy comes to the ringside is silence, and I don't think you ever got that with Marc Mero.
No, and again, I don't think it's by anything that he did. Like when you were saying, you know, some guys are at the middle of the card, some are at the top. When the bell rang and when he was in the ring, Marc Mero in 94, 95, 96, when he came to WWF as the Wild Man and was, like you said, won the Intercontinental title, feuding with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, pre-Triple H days. I mean, it certainly wasn't anything in the ring that Marc Mero did that didn't bring him to the top of the card, whether they didn't feel that his character or whether maybe, dare I say, he didn't have the right connections or whatever, but it certainly didn't have anything to do because Marc Mero in those mid-'90s at WCW was doing some of the most exciting stuff before they had all the cruiserweights in there, before everybody was doing a 450, before everybody did a Hurricane Rana, before everybody was extreme, let's say, to use a term from another organization. Marc Mero was doing some pretty eye-opening stuff, was pretty innovative, and again, could he have been at the top of the card? Why not? I mean, you'll never know now, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you totally. Like you said with Steven Regal, or William Regal as he became known in WWE. Those guys, you knew you were getting a great match out of guys like that, and you always did.
Absolutely, and just yet another reason when you were going to a card back in those days, you knew you were going to get your money's worth, and certainly something to be said there. Another thing about Marc Mero I really enjoyed was he's another guy in a long line of guys that got their first gimmick from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. That was very interesting to find out. Not only he, but Buff Bagwell, a couple other guys that are slipping my mind right now. Scum, maybe you can help me out. My memory's terrible. But I know that we've had some guests on that, you know, we ask them, oh, where did you get your first character from? Or how did you establish that persona? The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dusty was spitting them out pretty much to everybody. I mean, at that point in time, he was the man back there, and obviously he had a lot of good ideas. Like, I think you referenced Bagwell when he was on with us a while back now, as saying, you know, it was a time for gimmicks. And when he first said Marcus Alexander Bagwell, he said, man, you know, it's not going to work. And he said, no, the young kid from Marietta, they're going to get behind you down here. They're going to get behind you. And what did Buff say? Sure enough, they got behind it. It worked. Johnny B. Bad, you know. He said to him, the next thing he knows, he's getting invited by Michael Jackson to come to his concert. Never even thought the guy was black. I mean, say what you want about it, but Marc Mero is being asked to be on this program and being interviewed because he was Johnny B. Bad. If he didn't come in and make that move with that gimmick, the fact that you're saying that people are reporting on him to the day, that's 20 years ago. I mean, say what you want about it. It was terrible. It was this. It was that. You're putting the pen to the paper on it 20 years later. How bad was it?
Certainly. And I'll tell you what, in the line of wrestling lore, there's always a worse gimmick. Oh, that was the worst. No, there was always something even more worse. And, the best thing you could do is take the hand that's dealt with you and play it and do the best you can. And certainly another guy that did that was Marc Mero. I enjoyed his in-ring work as good as anybody else. And now certainly I have an opinion about the Johnny B. Bad character. I wasn't a huge fan of that dude. I'm like a 23-year-old fraternity animal. Like, that's the last thing I want to watch is, like, Little Richard. But, when the bell rings, the character, the charisma and the persona kind of gets put to the side and it's time to go to work. He certainly was as captivating as anybody in the ring. So, I mean, there you go. Another guy, just like Goldust, he's this and that, and he's androgynous, or, like the quotes that Scott Hall was saying, but when it comes right down to it, his in-ring work is fantastic. That move he does where he drops on his back and punches you in the face when you're about to go for like a sunset flip or something, that's a fantastic move. And everybody knows it's coming now. His brother Cody's doing it as well. So there you go. I mean, you got guys that are certainly flamboyant as hell in the ring, flamboyant as hell when it comes to being a persona or delivering a promo. But when the bell rings, it's time to go to work.
Trust me, any means necessary to get over. That I'll take that route to, quote, get over.
Who wouldn't? I mean, that's what it's all about, right? And I think that's what differentiates some of the glory days spots of the glory days professional wrestling to today's current product is that, like we were talking about Dusty Rhodes giving you a character or Vince McMahon giving you a character, and then you're supposed to go out there and get yourself over. Like they said, now what we see in the current product is we are going to force feed you this gimmick until we say it's over. And I don't particularly care for that. And it's something that kind of turns me off of today's product is, there's and again, I'm not going to use a particular gimmick or a particular character because at the end of the day, you're the performers and they're pretty much given a task to do, and whether or not they do it well, that's everybody's personal taste or personal opinion. But the MO, the business plan. Back in the day, it was, hey, let's work on this character, let's see where it goes, let's see where it takes us, and then the talent was able to kind of give their input and make themselves into a character. And today's product is like, no, you're this guy, and we're going to shove it down everyone's throat, and they will like you or too fucking bad.
Again, if something works, you can put whatever you want on paper. You can think that it's going to work, but until you step out from behind the curtain and see the fan reaction to it. I'm a firm believer that the performer needs to be able to have somewhat of his own personality in a character for it to work. Now, obviously, with a character like a Goldust or like a Johnny B. Bad, it's a set in stone character. But still, eventually, it needs to progress from that original. All right, here's the guy with the wig, with the gold paint and the bodysuit on that's crawling around and rubbing himself and blowing kisses. There needs to be more to it than that. And if you'll remember, eventually, when it started picking up steam, they did that sit-down interview with JR on Raw, the 2 or 3-parter, where you got into the life of Dustin Runnels, Terry Runnels, who he was married to at the time. And then from then on in, that character kind of took a different life with the fans. With the Johnny B. Bad character, there was never really that opportunity for Mero in WCW because God knows what was going on around that point in time in WCW. But, some of the characters were just ridiculous. But he was that good that eventually the teased out poofy hair and some of the other stuff wasn't there. Take a look at Johnny B. Bad when he debuted, and then take a look at him right before he left. And the Johnny B. Bad that you saw coming to the ring didn't look much different than Marc Mero when he showed up as the Wild Man.
No, absolutely right. And again, that was, a company giving that person a chance to establish their character on their own, which I'm a firm believer in. And you look at all sects, SECTS, all sects of professional wrestling, and what I mean by that are little groups. There's the NWO people, the Click guys, and then there's the Jim Cornettes and the Paul Bears, the Percy Pringles, and your Bobby Heenans, and you got guys over here and guys over there, the guys that come from maybe different eras and different times and different federations. But the one thing they all have in common, they all say, and Scum, you touched on it, is that the best characters are guys that are just an extension, amped up of who they are, is their own personality. And that will never go away and that will never change. And I think that when you're given a character, you're either going to embrace it and do the best you can, or you're just going to go out there and do your job and say, oh, yeah, I play that guy on TV, which I think we see a lot more nowadays, like I mentioned. But, you know, he could have that gimmick could have failed miserably had he not put his all into it.
A man that is often criticized by the wrestling community that had his mitts in the action behind the scenes on the creative end for many years during that Attitude Era, always preached that the character needs to be an extension of the character. For a character to get over, would need to be an extension of the performer themselves to some extent. The Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Mankind, the Rock, all the biggest characters were that person times 1,000. And those are the ones that work the best.
Totally, and that goes across the board. You mentioned three of the biggest names ever, but certainly, you know, guys like like Marc Mero, or guys in the past, like, you know, we got when Marcus Bagwell became Buff Bagwell, that certainly did wonders for his career. Granted, he had the injury and the, you know, poor booking and this and that. All that aside, his character of Buff and the laugh and the tan and the big smile and the, you know what I mean, that is him. I mean, we, like you said, he's friends of the show. We've had plenty of opportunities to speak to Buff Bagwell off the air, and I think more so than a lot of people, it's certainly that Buff character is an extension of himself. So sometimes you can get into a character that maybe isn't you, but it kind of eventually evolves into exactly who you are. Steve Austin's another great example because they brought him in, you know, like, you know, we all know now he was the ringmaster, which, you know, if you think about it, Steve Austin was one hell of a worker, and he could get in the ring and put on a great match, even, you know, so much, you know, before the Stone Cold character came about, but as he was given time to develop. Another guy, Jake the Snake Roberts, once he was the Snake, the trust me and the low tone. Another guy from the glory days of wrestling that took his character, even though he says he hated snakes, he brought it with him everywhere he went. He learned to love it, and he made himself a very, very, you know, remembered figure in professional wrestling. So there are guys out there that have been given a, you know, quote unquote, a bad hand, so to speak, and still played it to the best of their abilities and really made something of themselves.
Certainly have. You know, and then to lead us down a path that we'll be heading later this week, there were certainly some guys who didn't really need a gimmick, and they could just be themselves amped up by 100, and that would go over. Who might come to mind there, Steve? I don't know. Ken Shamrock, maybe?
Hey, when all else fails, scream on, break a limb.
That's right. I mean, he'll be back with us this Wednesday, but, I mean, take a look at that character, if you want to call it that, the world's most dangerous man. First off, he got that label from ABC News, referred to him to that on a piece, on a news program. So that's not really a stretch. That's a major media outlet referring to him as that. He comes in. He was a killer in UFC. We spoke with him. He talked about his early days with Buzz Sawyer. What did he do for Buzz? Not learn how to wrestle, kill people, break arms, hurt people, and then Buzz is taking their money and putting it in his pocket when they didn't want to come back and face this animal anymore. Fast forward a few years down the road, he comes into WWF, and what's his persona? Just a madman. He's suplexing referees all over the place. He's winning matches, and then they're ringing the bell and disqualifying him because he won't let go of the ankle lock. He's screaming, punching himself in the face as he walks out to the ring. So again, there's a perfect example of the opposite of your flamboyancy, the opposite of your gimmick that you need. There's somebody who took his persona, times it by 100. It worked. It was real believable.
Very good point. And like you said, we do have Ken Shamrock on a special edition of WGD Weekly this Wednesday, October 30th. We hope that you can join us. It'll be on sometime towards the evening. We didn't want to put it on Thursday for Halloween. We know everybody probably has some sort of commitments with their kids or their family. So we got that out to you the day before Wednesday, October 30th. We got that special edition of WGD Weekly with Ken Shamrock where he comes back on our show to talk about some of the things that were posted recently on Twitter, on Wrestling Inc., some of the news outlets that we've been privy to be a part of here recently. We wanted to thank once again Wrestling Inc., Online World of Wrestling, so many other websites that had picked up our article on our show, on Ken Shamrock and on Larry Zbyszko. Plenty more to come there, folks. So stay tuned. WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We always got a little something going on for you guys. Love classic wrestling. Couple of crazed wrestling fans. Been around the industry for all our lives watching it. Certainly something that we enjoy very much. We wanted to thank you all once again for joining us. We're running out of time, Scum. Anything you wanted to add on before we head on out?
No, just tell everyone tune in. It's going to be hard-hitting. It's going to be current. It's not going to be like this where we walk through everyone's career. It's going to be more of a news update with Ken Shamrock, and that we're going to get to the bottom of what he meant by blackballed. We're going to talk about the crazy comments by Dana White. We're going to talk about WWE and TNA, the possibility of him coming back. And just like the last one, Steve, just like I say all the time, and at the risk, now I'm a little hesitant because I feel like in some way I may have channeled my inner superstar Billy Graham after reading that quote. Not one to not be original, but you can bet your bottom dollar that once again, Wednesday, October 30th, with our special edition with Ken Shamrock, that WGD Weekly, Steve, and the Scum will once again be the latest sensation sweeping the wrestling radio nation, baby. And speaking of which, if that isn't original enough, getting back to your earlier comment about what am I going to be for Halloween, I definitely know one line that no one's ever used before. So if anyone thinks that's not original, I'm pretty sure that the Scum coined the phrase, I need this dump like I need the AIDS, if you hear what I'm screaming.
Absolutely. And Scum, I think you're underestimating yourself, because in all the time that we've spent watching professional wrestling in our lives, 25, 30 years of it, I had never once have heard anybody call themselves the Scum. So there you go. That's about original as you're going to get. Simplistic yet perfect. The Scum. And Steve, WGD Weekly, thanks so much for joining us once again. We're going to head on down the line. We wanted to thank you. It's been a great show. Again, we got Marc Mero this week. Fantastic guy. Want to wish them all the best with thinkpause.org. That anti-bullying campaign is certainly something to be aware of, and we want to thank them once again, Scum. We're out of time. You hear that music. That means it's time to head on down. We will see you on Wednesday, October 30th, with a special edition of Ken Shamrock, and next Sunday, who knows who's going to join us on WGD Weekly with Steve and the Scum. We'll see you then.
Thank you. Thank you all for nothing. If I have made just one person here this week happy, it has been worth it. And good beats.